This is TRAXXfm, and it's time for Face to Face with your host, speaking to today's panelists. Face to Face, exclusively on TRAXXfm.
Welcome to this week's edition of Face to Face for the show dated Thursday, 21st October 2021. My name is Kong Yu, as always, with you on the segment. And this time, we are getting face to face, heading towards Budget 2022, the tabling and the unveiling of, scheduled for next Friday. Here to talk to us about expectations, performance, her own thoughts on what's been happening as well as we get up towards the tabling of Budget 2022. I have with me Yeen, founder and chief executive officer for the Center of Research Advisory and Technology Create. Yeen, it's good to see you. Hi.
Good morning. Oh no, still good morning. Thank you very much for having me back here. I haven't been to the studio for a year.
That's
I think.
Right. Yeah. And I last spoke to you.
Yeah, I know. And this is my first session as well.
That's right. And these are things are meant to be, as they say, right?
No, I know. And we didn't plan it, right?
No, we did not. And it's, it's so much has happened in the past year. So much has happened in the past year and 9 months.
Yes.
Right? And it's just been, tremendous in terms of the effect on, obviously, all of us. And also for Malaysia as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
and globally.
That's right, globally, right? But zooming back to Malaysia, so for us, with the budget about to be tabled, I mean, that's going to be significant in terms of the resources, as well as how we actually, in a way, refocus back towards where we are. And with, importantly, I think the lessons learned as well, isn't it?
Well, if you learn any.
Hopefully, right? And that's what we want to touch on. And hopefully the budget will also reflect where it is that we need to actually adjust our focus. And of course, with the monetary budget planning also that comes with it. Yeah. So the previous year budget for this year, right, 2021, was geared towards naturally promoting public health. So a lot of the resources were allocated towards getting the rakyat as healthy as possible, addressing those who had been stricken by COVID, and focusing really in the recovery of the health perspective. Naturally, job opportunities is something that is going to be still a concern. It was, in fact, before the pandemic hit. Just like areas of digital tech, high technology, and so on was already primed to be the focus for the future, even before COVID hit. And now, 19 months later, after the pandemic started, we find ourselves, that's definitely going to be a key focus. But where do we bridge the gap between where we are and where we want to head in terms of those sectors? In your opinion, how has the country performed overall with Budget 2021 in achieving the set goals, now that we are about to enter the endemic phase of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I feel that first and foremost, the COVID-19 global pandemic has somewhat or certainly have changed the way we live, we work, and even how governments administer their own respective countries. And around the world, we know that governments, businesses, employees, and even the wider community are actually being forced to adapt and learn to operate in a climate of uncertainty. And I think the word being able to survive under uncertainty, to be able to be agile all the time, it's not going to change, at least for the foreseeable future. Okay? And you spoke about Budget 2021. And as I remember that the then Budget 2021 was then under a new government. Okay? And then and it was announced during a global health crisis. So it was also a continuation from economic stimulus packages that was announced since early 2020, which had amounted to over 300 billion ringgit. Okay, so with a total of 322.2 billion allocated in 2021, the budget 2021 was then the biggest ever, if we all still remember. We always say that it was an inflated budget. It was an expanded budget. And it was being done in the bid to actually boost economic resilience. That's one. Number two, to safeguard the well-being of the rakyat, as you said. The third is to reinforce the healthcare sector, especially the public healthcare, in the nation's path to recovery. So in 2021, we thought that we are recovering from COVID, right, during the last quarter of 2021. So back then, the 2021 budget was then geared towards recovery. But who would have imagined that we had so many lockdowns after that due to circumstances, right? So inclusivity then was very much, was very prominently featured, okay, in what the finance minister was saying, that the priority to protect the people above all else. That was the key message that we had last year. Okay, and there was actually something for everyone, if you all remember, from businesses of all sizes to education providers, the gig workers, the vulnerable groups, and even the indigenous people. That was the key theme and the key focus that we saw in Budget 2021. And, you know, short of a windfall tax back then, corporations that have actually experienced a boon as a result of the pandemic, for example, the glove manufacturers especially, if you remember that they also committed 400 million towards the COVID-19 pandemic, recovery phase. And somehow, the COVID-19 global pandemic and the crisis actually continue to disrupt manufacturing and the global supply chain.
Right.
And I think we also spoke about that last year,
Yes.
with severe consequences for society, for businesses, for consumers, and also the global economy. And Malaysia, of course, is not being spared as well. So since the beginning of the outbreak, the global production system, as we have all seen, has actually been challenged by factory shutdowns around the world, not only Malaysia, demand surges for essential goods. If you remember, we had people fighting for face masks, hospitals around the world fighting for PPEs, and then the vaccines, and then the syringes. All those became essential items and essential goods when countries are fighting to ensure that the public healthcare system have got what they need or what we need to fight the pandemic, right? So, if you still remember the stockpiling from certain countries, and just the stockpiling at the society level, where people stock up toilet rolls,
Right.
people stock up rice and oil and all the essentials, and the panic buying among the society. All right. So as well as the shifting of consumer preferences and consumer behavior. That was actually something that we saw over the last 18 months. And we really cannot forget about all those changes, because earlier on, you remember you mentioned about the digitization of societies, of e-commerce and all that. Those things actually started before COVID came.
Yep.
But somehow the entire 18 months of COVID, or nearly 2 years, have somehow accelerated the progression and the development
Absolutely.
of that particular sector.
Yes.
And we didn't need to do anything to push too hard for people to just switch online.
That's the thing. I mean,
Right.
so we've got, the obvious push of consumer behavior towards that. And it's, I think, a good thing, if you look into the whole overall context of the pandemic. Yeah. But where it is, I think we need to address is whether or not we, from the knowledge perspective, are ready to ride with this wave. We know that everybody is generally more online. We do more online ever. We've never done as much online as we have nowadays compared to 3-4 years ago. Yeah, so we need to address the technical aspects of it. Internet speeds is still something that.
Yes, infrastructure.
That's right. Infrastructure is something that's still. In fact, I think it is the priority, and hopefully we will see the developmental budget reflecting that, like cow. I can't think of a better word. It needs to,
We really need a boost. We
That's
need
right.
a booster
That's right.
to that infrastructure front. But just
absolutely.
just a little more to add on is that I realize I believe that facing up to all the challenges that I mentioned earlier, and all the disruptions that these 18 months have seen, and have somehow those disruptions have turned into our new norm, or the norm that we have to live with. But what we can see is that the new form of collaboration across industries, across companies, across governments and administrations, to ensure business continuity and societal development needs to happen. Because what we need to do is not only to protect political interests, we need to protect the people, the employees. We need to improve supply chain resilience of businesses, of society, of public healthcare, of how people think, the mental health issues of people. All those need to ensure that the entire global value chain of human, not only supply chain of certain industries that have somehow traditionally been optimized for cost competitiveness reasons. But through this pandemic, we need to ensure that companies, societies, nations need to reorient ourselves and our mindset towards new approaches, which are somehow prone to risk competitiveness. Okay, instead of cost competitiveness, now we need to move towards risk competitiveness. And I think it is time that everybody around the world to start building new strategies in collaboration with governments, people not from their own sector, to be able to adapt and respond to future shocks that it may come.
Right. Interesting thoughts here. Thanks for that. Yeah. Overall, of course, we already had, like I said, a lot of the ideas, notions, and important focus prior to even when the pandemic hit, like the high-tech digitization areas and so on. Yeah. And similarly, the UN Sustainable Development Goals were implemented with Budget 2021 as well. And of course, this will continue on from now on for this year, because it is part of the overall SDGs overall. And with the alignments and initiatives with the recently SDG aligned 12 Malaysia plan as well, right? We combine that with the shared prosperity 2030 vision overall. Now, what steps do you think can be taken to ensure that the country's economic performance can recover from the pandemic?
I really don't think there is one magic recipe or ingredient to say that if you do this, it's going to happen. But I think a few things need to be done without a doubt. Is that one, we need to ensure business continuity. We need to protect the employees. We need to protect the people. So immediate actions that need to be taken by leaders of society, leaders of companies, and even government is that we need to consistently and continuously and proactively take actions to protect employees. That's one. Ensure supply security, mitigate any financial impact, and navigate continuous market uncertainty as demand drops. Because you really don't know in which sector demand will rise, in which sector demand will drop based on situations. And things can be really fluid at the moment, because now that we may be talking about moving into an endemic stage, but winter is coming. Nobody knows if COVID decides to mutate. Nobody knows if it's going to be a global spike again, and if the whole world is going to go into another lockdown. So nobody can tell for sure, although WHO have said that we should be looking at moving from pandemic to an endemic, right? But certain things cannot be predicted. So as businesses, as government, we need to be ever ready. The battery brand,
Yes.
ever ready. I think that is something that we need to look at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting thought. So, I mean, you speak on a broader perspective, right? Which getting right down to the fundamentals of how we generally should be more resilient. Businesses should have, not just the protection buffer for the employees, for the workers, for staff, for manpower overall, but generally, even when it comes to infrastructure and also supply. Those are really, really important key fundamentals, I think, that we have learned from maneuvering through the pandemic. Now, getting to the more detailed nitty-gritty parts of it. Now, for the Budget 2022, the Finance Minister has said that the government will focus on the key sectors which are badly affected from the COVID-19 pandemic, rightfully so, right? For us in Malaysia, including tourism, retail, and also SMEs. Those are key concerns there. A couple of aspects of it. The SMEs have already always been a topic of discussion every time the budget is tabled, isn't it? And now even more so with, what was it? There were some statistics there about how many SMEs have been shut.
Yes.
Right? And how many micro businesses have shut since the pandemic hit. So, wow, that's going to be definitely one major focus. And we've been speaking about it for years. That's the thing, Yeen.
Yeah.
So it really comes to the crunch now, isn't it? Right. So let's talk about those, yeah?
So I have two focuses here.
Okay.
I'll focus on tourism first, and then I will talk about SMEs and the micro SMEs as a whole. Okay. So the government have said very clearly that the budget 2022 will definitely focus on the few sectors that we mentioned, the tourism, the SMEs, the retail sectors, and we always talk about how badly the pandemic have affected all of them, and the government have said that the government are committed to revive all pandemic affected sectors. All sectors have been addressed, okay? And the tourism sector GDP contributed to 15.9%, or 240.5 billion in 2019. However, it fell to 14.1% or 199.4 billion in 2020 due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the minister have also said that out of 300, that some 337 out of 688 applicants for tourism financing have been approved under the Penjana program, and the minister also said that financing facilities will be available for companies who need help. But I think, in my opinion, I feel that tourism sector in Malaysia needs to be relooked at. I think we need more innovative solutions to sell the content that this country has. Let me give you an example. What have we been selling? We have been selling our blue skies, cotton clouds, sandy beaches, right? Tell me if Thailand has it. Tell me, have not Singapore built those as well? So how do you think Malaysia is going to race against the regional competitors? Cambodia have got exotic islands. Vietnam has got very nice beaches, islands and resorts as well. So how do you think Malaysia is going to sell the same product, exactly the same product that we all have across the region, to people outside of the region? Okay, I think beyond looking at how we should save and rescue the tour operators, I think at a higher level, at a macro level, I think it's time for Malaysia to relook at how can we reinvesting in in the tourism sector. Really, it is not about putting up how many billboards around the world. It is really not about how you repackage and make a new TV or make a new song for Malaysia Truly Asia kind of thing. I think it is the re-innovating or reimagining our tourism product that really needs to be done in this country. And this is what we are lacking. So no matter how much the government can assist the tour operators, but if the product itself, the country itself, the reputation, the culture, how we do our messaging is not being improved, there's just so much that you can do. And really, it is not the fault of the operators. It is also not the fault of COVID. That yes, due to COVID, borders are not open, people cannot come, people cannot fly out and all that. But if you look at the grand scheme of things, I think it is time for Malaysia to redevelop our tourism products, to reinvest, to have more products that we can sell.
Right.
Otherwise, balik product sama. That's what we always saying.
Interesting thought. So overall, a repositioning, right? In light of the change, all the shutdowns, border restrictions, and all that we've had to face throughout. So now's a good time to actually look deeper, not just about making sure that people's livelihoods
because
looked into.
Tourism product and tourism industry is something very long term. It is really not about saving how many tour operators. Tour operators will only be able to survive if this country have got good products to sell. I think that shouldn't be missed. So that's on tourism.
Okay.
On SMEs, the minister have said that 11,000 SME entrepreneurs and 26,000 micro SME entrepreneurs were forced to shut down during the pandemic because they just cannot cope with operating costs. Okay, and the minister also said that if the allocation that the ministry has been looking at and asking MOF, then more than 192,000 entrepreneurs may get the loan for them to make a comeback. Okay, so this is support from the financial front. But what I want to also highlight here is that in the business ecosystem, okay, it is always like a race that everybody is running. You may be running a sprint, you may be running a marathon. If a certain businesses just cannot cope due to a pandemic for whatever reason, your rental doesn't come down, you have to pay full salary or whatever, then it is time for the entrepreneur and the boss, the owner of the business, to relook at your business model.
Absolutely.
Okay? You really need to innovate, and you cannot always be looking at the government to say, I got no money, I need loan. If you don't give it to me, I'm going to shut down. Then if I'm going to be very blunt and mean, I'm going to say, if you can't survive, then you shouldn't be in business. Right? But everybody will hate me for saying that. But I'm just saying that from a real business perspective.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at any businesses, the whole crux of it is that, you have to be innovative.
Correct.
You have to be sustainable, and you cannot think short term.
And you need to be profitable.
Yes.
Because it's a business.
Yep.
If you want to do something for the sake of doing it and not looking at the bottom line, please run an NGO or run a charity.
Right.
Or a social enterprise. You shouldn't be in business. Yeah.
I mean, it's a harsh.
It's very harsh.
It's a harsh,
But it's
stance to
reality.
take, but it's reality, and I agree with that. I mean, I also, we might get flagged from people who have had struggling businesses,
Yes.
but it really is an opportunity as well.
Yes.
Why is the business struggling?
Yeah.
Right? Does the business need to be there in the first place?
Exactly.
Or is it just on people trying to be entrepreneurial and trying to essentially make a living and make a business out of something that cannot actually sustain itself?
Yes, cannot sustain itself. Yeah, that's very important.
Okay, let's talk about SMEs. SMEs fall under a different category altogether. My own personal feel is that sometimes just the way an SME is run, right, may not literally or may not conveniently fall into a proper structure that something like a national budget can cover, right? What is your thoughts there, and how can we again bridge the gap? Does the gap actually need to be bridged in the first place?
Exactly. I really like your last sentence. You see, most people feel and think that the budget is the miracle pill that solved all problems. But no, budget is just a plan that how are you going to spend the earnings that you make for the next year. You allocate, you put your eggs in a basket, and then hopefully by the end of the following year, you don't have to borrow more basket to keep your eggs, or you don't need to find eggs to fill up your baskets. That's actually what budget is all about. But you see, the wrong misconception or the hoorah that people fry up, pre-budget, post-budget, that makes the industry and the people have all the hope in an annual budget announcement. And I don't think that's very fair. You see, you earlier said that SME sometimes may not be relevant in the grand scheme of things when budget's being announced. It is the same as the middle income group. It is the same for the professionals like you and me and everybody in this studio. Simply because we are not rich enough to not rich enough to enjoy the fruit of being at the T2% or T1%. And unfortunately or fortunately, we are not poor enough to be at the bottom 4 or 10%. No, don't talk about even the bottom 20%, the really rock bottom that needs 8. The rest of the 90% of the people, however, in reality would just need to sort yourself out. So SMEs, the middle income group, the professionals, the wage earners simply fall under that category, who are not rich enough to get to have the privileges, not poor enough to get help. That's it. It's just simple budget reality.
That's right. Yeah. Outside, of course, like let's say you talk about the those who are underemployment, right? That do fall under the income group. Then, of course, there are certain relevant parts. Taxation, of course, is always one
It's just
key
very
part
little.
of it. But it's just one part, you know.
Yes.
But in terms of help, assistance, and so on, yeah, right. And really, the key word is you got to help yourself, lah.
Really, I think the role of the government is to sort the big things right.
That's right. I mean,
The
infrastructure.
schools, the roads,
Yes.
the bridges, the highways, the hospitals, your EPF, your SOXO,
Yeah.
those things. As long as the entire ecosystem can run, the government have done a good job. I don't think it is the job and the responsibility of the government to help you put food on your table. I think that's a bit too much to ask for.
Okay. Interesting thoughts there. Okay, I'm just waiting for any cues there. All right, so we're going to continue in the meantime, right? On the numbers perspective, let's talk about this. It was reported that Malaysia's GDP is expected to grow between 3 to 4% for this year. The IMF and the World Bank are forecasting a 5 to 6% growth for next year, showing or indication or building in signs of recovery. What can we expect now that the National Recovery Plan has been implemented and also restrictions are being lifted?
Well, I really don't know. But what I want to see is that how will the government reduce the budget gap? That's one. I would like to see how much budget is being allocated for development, because it is very dangerous if we continue to allocate a high percentage of the budget into operating costs.
Yep.
And expenses. Then that would mean that we are compromising the development of this country for other spending. That is what I really don't want to see. And I think what we need to also look at is that the exchange rates between Malaysia and the US dollar, and how much per barrel the crude oil will be. Those will be somehow the determining factor of how much the ringgit can stretch. The recent announcement by the Feds that says that the US will not raise its interest rate would also mean that the US dollar may continue to weaken until 2023, right? And so in general, if we are talking about a simultaneous ringgit appreciation and a possible greenback depreciation, this could be good for Malaysia, of course. But of course, if we have like 1 ringgit is now worth more than the 4.13 or 4.15 US dollar
Right.
ringgit, then per US dollar to the ringgit, then how we should also then look at how we actually allocate our budget. Although a lot of our budget and the spending is actually have a direct correlation with how much the US dollar is valued against the ringgit.
Yeah, those are the key determinants, unfortunately. But it's true. It's about how to actually bridge the gap of the deficit, like you were saying, and also the focus really should be on development.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, right? That 100% agree with you. Yeah. Of course, our Finance Minister Tengku Datuk Sri Zafrul Tengku Abdul Aziz also announced, right, alluded that budget 2022 will still remain expansionary. Right, just like budget 2020, I believe it was, yeah, and also conceptualized as a recovery budget, like what 2021's budget started out as, right, to support the government's wider and longer-term reform efforts under now the 12 Malaysia plan, right? In your opinion, how different will this year's budget be compared to last year or maybe the year before in terms of these key focus?
I don't think, I personally don't see too much of surprises. One is, yes, we need to restore foreign investor confidence. We have to remember that the political rapid change in politics that we had in Malaysia over the last 18 months have definitely put off investors. We saw investors pulling out from the country. We saw the domestic reinvestment have significantly reduced. Although from the pandemic, we all know that we should be investing nearer to our shores. Okay, when the supply chain, when logistics break down, if your manufacturing plant, or even if you do smart manufacturing, your bases are too far apart or too widely spread because of cost competitiveness that you earlier on were accounting for. But the risk competitiveness, because, as I talk about risk competitiveness of how you strategically place your investment, it's going to, determine how you're going to survive should the next shock comes. So I think the resilient, local government, local economic resilience towards the people, towards businesses, to safeguard the livelihood of the people, protecting employees, the well-being of the people, and the business continuity. All those should be, and I think they will be, the key focus of this year's budget. But one of the issue that we have in this country is that there are always too many considerations. Too many considerations, political considerations, the racial consideration, the unity considerations, all sorts of things.
Yes.
And therefore, when you are the decision maker and you just have too many considerations for you on the table, are you going to make decisions based on emotions, or are you going to make decisions based on science and calculation?
Yeah, absolutely right. Yes. Definitely something to think about in terms of simplifying and focusing on where we need to focus. Speaking of which, right? So Budget 2022 has this theme of the 3 Rs. Just wondering, any final thoughts on this? Recovery, resilience, and reform, right? For, in general, these 3 themes. What's your opinion? Anything to add on these?
Execution. Enforcement. I think for any governments and any administration, policies, budget is part of policy as well, okay? So policies that's being put through Parliament needs to be enforced and implemented properly. Otherwise, don't have it at the first place.
Okay, well said, and a good place to end our discussion today. Thank you so much, Yeen. It's been a great discussion on this as we lead up to Budget 2022. Then, of course, it is going to be tabled and unveiled on next Friday. Make sure you tune in to us. We will have live budget specials from the evening onwards, from the afternoon, 4 p.m. onwards on the 29th, as well as the tabling and a post-budget discussion as well. Thank you, Yeen.
Thank you so much, Kang Yu.
Right, see you then, and take care, stay safe in the meantime.
Same to you. Thank you.